to our senior class exercises. In this beginning segment, we are going to honor members of the Amherst community who have been particularly valuable to us as a class throughout our 4 years here at Amherst. This is also a good time for our guests to see
Bernice certainly deserves all this applause because Bernice works in Valentine, and everybody sees her every single day. And she's always there with a smile for everyone. And she really, at Amherst, you really start to lose touch with what's really important in your life, especially when you're bogged down with a lot of work and a lot of things that really, maybe in the long run, aren't so important. But Bernice always reminds you of the importance. And she went through a lot of hard times this year, and she never let it show to any of the students. She was always there to be happy to us and to be nice to us. And let's start clapping for her again, because I think she's good.
I'm presenting an honorary class membership to Alexander Morton, who this September will have been at Amherst College for 25 years in Cross Library. And as Kirk said, there are days when every student feels that his or hers are certainly the greatest woes in the world. And walking into Frost Library with an overdue book often seems like a monumental task. And Mr. Morton receives every excuse or sincere confusion equally with a dismissive wave of a hand as if he wants you to get out of his way as he clears the trouble that you built for yourself. And for helping us to relieve our load rather than adding his own troubles to it, we give him this membership.
He made work fun, and he was a great example for all of us. I worked for him during the summer and during the year, and a lot of the work that he does is always taken for granted. But I'm really proud that I can be here and give him his diploma as an honorary member of our class.
Sue Everton came to Amherst only 3 years ago. Since the day she arrived, she has continued to be a role model to both her players and her colleagues. Her ability to share her athletic knowledge is unsurpassable. Her energy and enthusiasm are contagious. Amherst is extremely fortunate to have found a woman whose love for athletics and coaching is only exceeded by her love for people and her willingness to give of herself. It is with great pleasure that we recognize Sue Everton as an honorary class member.
I don't know what I'd do, but he, as we all know in our class, he should probably be a regular member of our class. Let me tell you why he isn't. 3 weeks into our junior year, he found out what was supposed to be a muscle pull was actually a tumor on the inside of his right femur, which would turn out to be as big as a grapefruit. And fortunately, it was benign, but if he had to get surgery on it, if he didn't, it would have broken his leg in about 3 weeks or something like that, which isn't much if you look at the size of his legs. But seriously, he's been my best friend for 4 years, and I'm proud to award him with his honorary membership.
I'm proud to introduce
She also spoke at our senior assembly, and this is only fair because she was more nervous than I am, I believe. She wouldn't let us get away with anything, so she gave us pretty much everything. That's about fair. She's consistently one of the most emphatic and also very nice people I know. That's a pretty rare combination as well. She's a great brain and a good friend to our class. And so we're happy to have her with us and sad to leave her.
Members of the class of 1989, thank you for the opportunity to address you and your guests this afternoon. Since the Office of Public Affairs has kindly requested that I keep my remarks brief, instead of embracing all knowledge as I had originally planned, let me reflect on a few topics which struck me this past week while I was relaxing down in the pond. Now, being a philosophy major, I've developed a certain tendency to boil things down to big abstract terms which everyone uses and no one can define. The Amherst experience is no exception. So, as I sorted through my thoughts and distilled my memories during this past week, I thought of my thesis, because every senior knows that by the end of your year, everything becomes your thesis. And this speech is no exception. In my thesis, I wrote 55 pages about one 14-page essay. Today, I'd like to narrow my topic even further and speak for 5 minutes on reality. And since it seems that our job here at Amherst has been to learn, let me offer you a few thoughts on learning and the reality of that process. Learning, like laundry, is one of those funny things that our parents expect us to have done at Amherst. Try to learn from everything we do. Now, the amazing thing about this whole line of rhetoric is that for the most part, it is a gem of great wisdom. As the winner of the Pond Award, which is given to that Amherst senior who dresses most like a dad on the weekend, I feel qualified to make the following suggestion. I'm going to go out on a limb and recommend that if you listen to only one thing that your parents tell you, it should be their instructions to you to learn. If you can grasp that truth, you have the tools to eventually figure out how to ignore everything else they tell you. For the child who has made a friend of learning will eventually divine that his parents probably did own shoes when they were young, and definitely did not walk uphill to school both ways. I will venture to say that most of us have learned a thing or two at the Parish College, whether we like it or not. I myself have learned to like Scotch whiskey and Chinese food. But let me mention some less obvious things that we have learned, the things we joked about sophomore year. We finally learned we didn't have to do all the reading. We finally learned that we handed papers whenever we wanted. By the professor and not by the title of the course. This kind of learning is, I think, neither wrong nor trivial. It is not what we came to Amherst to learn, but we have learned it by being here. I point to it mainly because it is the kind of learning most of us will be doing from now on. Some of us will continue to learn about Kant's transcendental deduction of the categories, but most of us will be trying to figure out how to eat without the transcendental guidance of Amherst College dining services. So with that sobering thought, let me move on to a topic that Kant and I both enjoy, reality. As you all know, one of the things which every commencement weekend speech must pay lip service to is every student's monster under the bed, the real world. Now, there are a variety of schools of thought on the real world. Some will offer you advice for dealing with it. Other speakers will tell you that it does not exist. And most of us are familiar with Rodney Dangerfield's advice in the movie Back to School, in which he says, "Don't go." I do not have any answers to the age-old question about whether college is real. I wonder, Free golf courses and all the food you can eat do not strike me as being very real, although I enjoy both. A relatively benevolent, protective police force also seems to be a luxury which I will miss. When others confront me with the unrealities of this college, saying that I go to a school completely removed from reality, I wonder how much of an indictment this is. Do the creature comforts of life here at Amherst mean that we cannot function in the real world? I think not. I have no solution to the college-real-world dichotomy, except to suggest that the two may be less dichotomous than they had first seemed. We are aware that Amherst has its own unrealities. Amherst, with its excellent faculty, large endowment, and location in a little hamlet of academics, can and sometimes does act as a law unto itself. We have gone so far as to ban snowball fights. Many consider our status unreal, almost surreal. But I would point out that the so-called real world has its unrealities too. If a de facto suspension of the drinking age here at Amherst strikes us as unreal, so should working a 90-hour week on Wall Street trying to keep up with the markets in Tokyo. So should stepping over the homeless while getting out of a cab. So should Iran-Contra in Beirut and South Africa. These are all, in some sense, unreal. No one here needs to be warned that there is death and famine and war after Amherst. I want only to warn you against buying into the lie that that is what makes the real world real. It is not. Expect the differences you will find. Prepare for the differences you will see. Work to change them if you can. Just don't be tricked into thinking that the world out there is any more or less real than your time in Amherst has been. But don't let the persuasive power of my oratory force you to see reality my way. And I won't try to use subtlety of argument to convince you to keep on learning. Rather, let me close by beating you over the head one final time with the rhetoric of our august elders. For they know whereof they speak. Enjoy learning. Seek knowledge. Behave on long-car trips. Never, ever drink bourbon after beer. Most of all, treat each other with respect and dignity, and love one another. Because you all deserve it, and it's a very nice way to live. Thank you.
To the members of the class of '89, families, extended families, friends, President Pouncey, professors, deans, staff, secretaries, and other members of our intimate Amherst community, I would personally like to welcome all of you to this first of self-congratulatory assemblies. These ceremonies and receptions always manage to evoke a certain degree of pride from the participants, and well that it should. Parents and guardians especially, please feel free to cease from taking pictures, correcting behavior, and lecturing to your children to give yourselves a hearty pat on the back. You helped finance one of the most exorbitant experiences for your first class graduation. And still brought your whole family here to smile about it. To the seniors, the culmination of our Amherst careers is coming to a close. These, our last 24 hours together, are the times to look back at our individual and collective accomplishments, to smile a little, to gloat a little, to drink heavily, and with smug looks of righteousness, we think of how good Amherst has been to us, or with bitterness, we rant and rave of how deeply Amherst really stuck it to us. But in the end, we can all rest contentedly with the knowledge that yes, it's finally over. Although I prefer to refrain from generalizing what the Amherst experience is like, I believe that one can say rather accurately that Amherst has attempted to do something to us. The college has contributed to what we are, tested who we thought we wanted to be, and encouraged us all to be indebted for a long time to come. The Amherst student seems to develop in a particular way, adopting a take-charge stance, cunningly employing all skills to the essence of her as being. Take, for example, the senior embarking on the beginning of the work week. Is it too much to ask that those damn people at B&G have my toilet paper here when I wake up in the morning? I mean, we pay $20,000 to go to this school. The least we can have is some tissue in the john. This school is so messed up. We pay all this money and we can't even have halfway decent food. The dishes always have crap in them. The libraries aren't open long enough. The snack bar always closes early. The gym isn't open long enough. I can't get the mail I want when I want to. And I always get all the junk mail I ever need. I can't get my meal equivalency when I need it. My room is too small, too cold, too cramped, too paper thin. The floors creak. My windows always get drafts. The fire alarms go off whenever they want to. My classes are too long and too early. My professors are boring. They want to take my beer off campus. And now they got an eye out on my soda. Amherst students can do nothing else to complain. It's not about the amount of work, it's about the quality of housing, or the social life, or the size of the school, or the level of diversity. I don't mean to trivialize our efforts. I'm sure the removal of the silver balls from the top of the campus center and the innovations in Valentine's salad bar, one by the way we can all take pride in, have led at least consistent revolutions in aesthetics and good taste. But to be quite honest, I do not know what that says about the quality of our passions. I believe that Amherst has trained us for many experiences, but what amount has had to do with reality? Should we be satisfied that our most significant struggles and battles here have had to deal with threats to our comfort? Many of us have spent our senior year grooming ourselves, our resumes, and our portfolios in order to make ourselves marketable for the world of corporate employment. Most of us are probably undecided about plans for the next 4 or 5 years. Yet tomorrow, we thrust ourselves outside of this bubble, our idyllic paradise, our home, Amherst. The toleration and promotion of diversity and difference is not a fundamental principle in the world outside, and threats to individual comfort are an everyday reality. People readily reap the benefits as well as suffer the consequences of prejudice, segregation, heterosexism, and sexual discrimination, with no conception of particular rights and privileges for a more egalitarian and just system of being. Indifference to sensitive global and national issues regularly passes through the minds and hearts of the struggling wage earner, while self-interest becomes the overwhelming factor. Are you prepared for this? How will the strength of our own individual characters stand up against these obstacles? Will you find the courage to stand on your own convictions, taking risks to retain a sense of individuality? Or will you begin to create your own bubbles in your own workspaces, in your own homes, over your whole lives? We've reached the end of a phase in our personal development, but not the end of it all. Class of '89, I would challenge all of you to look beyond the security of these hallowed halls, to perpetuate and reactivate your personal growth as an individual. Find the security within your own selves, to live the lives you're looking for, to be the people you want to be. Granted, our most utilized skill is our ability to complain, but you do not need a BA to complain. Your lives have so much more to offer than remaining passive. I challenge you to look past the obvious and the superficial, to maintain the unique qualities which each of you have provided this school in one way or another. I wish you the best of luck. I'll miss you all very much. Thank you.
For our guests who may be curious, these 3 speakers were chosen through a vote by their peers. This was only after we heard them and about 8 others give a short 2 to 3 minute statement on a couple of the ideas they might want to present at a class. If I can tell you, the talk given by this next speaker leaves me still a bit perplexed. I'm trying to figure everything out. This probably has to do with something with the fact that she packed about 8 million ideas in 2 or 3 pages. Margaret Stoll is a Phi Beta Kappa, majoring in English, and her home is Los Angeles. Please welcome Margaret.
I sat in the baccalaureate service this morning, trying to suppress the urge to yell madly during that moment of silence, waving my arms from the balcony. I felt as if it was the time when anyone objecting to the marriage of the bride and the groom should speak speak up or forever hold their peace. I was thinking, this can't be happening. This really shouldn't be happening. You don't know what you're doing here. I panicked. Silence, heat, all of your faces. I kept thinking, who are we mourning? Is it me? Is it me? Well, I didn't scream. But I was reminded of a poem by Emily Dickinson. Which could have been written to commemorate the graduation of the class of 1989, except for it was written in 1896. My life closed twice before its close. It yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me, so huge, so hopeless to conceive, as these that twice befell. Parting is all we know of heaven and all we need of hell. Our lives are closing. Our lives are opening, and I think perhaps the one facilitates the other. But I cannot think of another point in my life when I will be able to, this slowly, painfully, and consciously savor such an edge. Our trauma is a collective one, but a distinctly private one. Imagine the odd assemblage of disparate experiences sitting in folding chairs here today. You, parents, do not think that you are merely guests at this strange ritual. To us, you are our urgent proof that there is indeed life on the other side of this juncture. We look at you and try to conjure up the essential fantasy of our own future lives. We don't have anything else. Yet you watch our graduation as you probably remember your own. The generic black gowns you will put on are the same ones you put on, not so many years ago, but long before we made it into the picture. And we'll return ours tomorrow for 2 tickets to lunch. That's comforting, isn't it? I think I worry now that I am doomed to be forever plain wrapped in black, running down the streets of my abstract adult life with my black robes flapping behind me. Yet we remember graduation too. The word itself conjures up so many images. That reeling, your whole life flashes before your eyes, kind of pre-car crash newsreel of fragments of cornflake-encrusted coffee cups and white note cards, 2 thickly sliced cucumbers, and sitting on grass that was far too wet to sit on anyways, lots of blue pens. But the word simultaneously recalls memories that are not yet safe enough to be memories. Packing up my shabby posters, books whose shiny paper covers I lost long ago, and driving home to California with a carload of invisible friends packing bad jokes in the back seat. They will accompany me to strange, cheesy motels in Arizona, and I will not have to fast forward the parts of my mixtapes that they always hated. And I will be sorry. It seems I never would have come to college if I'd known we were going to graduate. And that seems to be an important part of why we came here at all. Tomorrow's formal closure is made up of many closures, and every day here my life ended and began and ended all over again. If I feel now that I'm staring at something huge and unnavigatable, perhaps it always should be so. If now I have to go out and make good on what I was going to be when I grow up, which was incidentally a fireman or a genie, I couldn't decide which, I think I've been doing that every day of my life, and I hope I always will. We give particular credit to this closing, but there seems to be something strikingly urgent about all the things we close ourselves off from in a given day that allows us to explore, to learn, all the things we do. This is a place of learning. We have sequestered ourselves off with lots of dead Greeks, and a text that I'm told apparently does not exist. We have learned to read for distinction, for difference, to define and redefine, as if by limiting our scope to one sentence and one word within that sentence, we can control an immediacy and expand in that control. We have learned as well that these definitions are largely fleeting and to a certain extent useless. We have learned to engage and to disengage, to exact from the smallest assignment incredibly disproportionate hours of struggling to think or far more painfully to procrastinate. And yet the space shuttle crashed Passion Valentine between my turkey sandwich and my salad, and I wasn't even late for class. We are insensitive, hypersensitive, histrionic, and unshakable. We are list makers, flakes. We have learned above all else to blow everything out of proportion. We've learned above all else to digest the undigestible. We have spent 4 years, 22 years, trying to get at it, trying to name or categorize, and at times push further away the thing it was forever just barely out of our grasp. We have failed, as we didn't know then, but we know now, that we inevitably would. And in the process, we have learned that we take ourselves far too seriously, but that not to would be worse, and we are painfully self-conscious, and we laugh. It seems to learn, we've forced ourselves to step back and sort of look over at a history of human life made up out of words from some vague netherland of, well, not objectivity, because our first lesson here revealed that as A, impossible, and B, dangerous. But perhaps it's something closer to curiously interested estrangement, closing, distance. I've often wished that my IBM keyboard had a 30-foot extension cord so that I could sit far back and get a bit of distance from the glowing green words and look across my own messy laundry to reconcile capitalism and democracy or the Brothers Karamazov. I couldn't. Because we know, too, that we are arming ourselves for some kind of battle, for a time when we can make our lives a place suitable to live in and structure our beliefs in a way that we can believe them. So too do we know that if the approach is objective, it is one that purposefully undermines itself. It must, the closings must be openings. But what does that transition, in perpetually settling and unsettling yourself, require? What are we numbing to get ourselves from breakfast to breakfast? How can all this become at all productive? What do we do with this splendidly articulated, increasingly specialized structure of knowledge in life, assuming we have either? In Beijing, in Canton, in Shanghai, hundreds of thousands of students attempted to turn knowledge, what we have learned as reading for distinction, into living for distinction. Theirs was not the careful dissection of a textual, conceptual difference that we are so fond of, but a movement towards cohesion, towards aligning the environment of knowledge with the environment of its own application. The New York Times last week quoted a 21-year-old woman returning from the protest to the library and back again in an attempt to finish her senior honors thesis. She says, "Our main task as students is to study, and we know that when we leave the university, we must earn a living based on what we have learned here. But what preoccupies us is the environment we will end up in. Will it be free and democratic, or will it be repressive?" In the call of students, somewhat like ourselves, for policies of democratization and liberalization that the Chinese government maintained, as did Mao in the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, that everything under the heavens is in chaos and the situation is excellent. The call has been sounded still. The meaning of their own splendid structure of knowledge rests not so much with the success of any political reform it demanded, but with the stubborn, irrefutable fact of the demand itself. And the fact of that demand is a kind of reform, and the presence of this kind of longing is meaning and learning. Just look at the papers. In Lithuania, in Latvia, in Beijing, Canton, Shanghai, we are witnessing the world in opening. It is something precarious, a bit wonderful, perhaps futile. But the direction of these movements of learning and longing is back, not futile at all. The earth is an exciting place to live, but we too live in the earth. And what are we to do with our own finely articulated, specialized structure of knowledge? What have we done with it all along? I think of this. The cars pass endlessly by my window on Route 9. I hear them, sometimes, sitting. In Valentine, I imagine how funny it all is. How we'd look from the road if the walls were invisible, and we could be seen sitting around small brown tables in clusters But how will we make it have been important? And what are we going to be when we grow up?
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back, and I appreciate and give a sermon. In recent times, we have witnessed sharp spasms of hostility to artistic, scholarly, and other kinds of expression. These incidents have occurred in countries supposedly committed to freedom of expression, as well as in places that scorn it. Where freedom of expression exists, it, more than any other right, is hated, resented, and violated. It seems the most menacing of all rights. Therefore, it is now and always has been the most vulnerable. Today, I would like to take up some recent worrisome incidents involving free expression in our society. I hope that it's fitting to discuss them with you on this occasion. As you, my seniors, move into the stream of professional and vocational life and the life of citizenship, my hope is that you will take Amherst seriously enough to remain protective of its most important precondition: free expression of every kind and in all directions. If the right of free expression has always been vulnerable in constitutional societies, I think that is because people live by words and images, by their intended and unintended meanings, by their understood and misunderstood suggestions. Everything important in human life is or depends on words and images. They constitute our lives. They are its currency, its medium, its substance, and most of its pleasures and pains. It is inevitable, consequently, that people will be sensitive to what is expressed and become passionate about it and may try to control it. Free expression grows yet more vulnerable because of the incredible abundance and profusion of words and images in the age of publicity and mass media. Everyone's world is now porous to an unprecedented degree. Words and images, and hence meanings and suggestions, never leave us alone. We are bathed in them. There is no escape from their public and commercial sources. One feels constantly exposed, imposed on, invaded. This abundance and profusion make us all the more sensitive to what is expressed. There is more to frighten us, or to disgust or outrage us. We grow acutely concerned with the effects on others, or we just hate and resent what we see and hear for what it is in itself. We tire of expression and wish to limit it. We imagine a world rid of much of what is now expressed, and filled instead with expression we admire, or expression that comforts or flatters us. What I want to propose is that such inevitable feelings in oneself or others must be resisted. We must not give in to our sense of grievance towards the right of free expression. Now, I know for myself how deep that sense of grievance goes. I fantasize censoring commercial advertising, abolishing political advertising, and commanding the news coverage. You will have other grievances and other compensatory fantasies. But I know that as a matter of right, the instincts to suppress are out of place. It makes no difference how strong or upright or self-persuaded these instincts may be. If you put all our grievances together, very little allowable expression would be left that was not conventional or passionless or indifferent. So we must persevere in the life of freedom for all our grievances. I would just like to talk about some of the recurrent sources of hostility to the right of free expression and some of the reasons for combating that hostility and hence for defending the right of free expression as if it were life itself. In what I'm about to say, I suspect that I may give offense. One cannot defend freedom of expression without pointing to sources of hostility to it, and some of these sources are groups in society that are respectable and even admirable. But how foolish it would be for me to hesitate when the occasion is, after all, academic, and the people gathered are friends who know how to forgive or overlook any offense. In the most general way, what are some of the standing sources of hostility to free expression, even in societies that are supposedly committed to the right of free expression? What are the motives of intolerance in our society? First, there is fear of subversion. Throughout this century, the federal government or state governments, often responsive to public pressures, have tried to punish political speech that was simply too radical. Mere abstract advocacy of revolution or of certain political and economic doctrines was made a criminal offense. And for a long time, indeed until 1969, 20 years ago, such efforts were upheld by the courts. If now these efforts are in abeyance, these efforts are likely to be made again. It is therefore wise to keep the record in mind. The case for restricting radical and revolutionary political speech can be made only if it is assumed that some large part of the population are unnaturally literal-minded and easily seduced, and that consequently everybody would be better off if the gullible ones were not allowed to hear certain ideas expressed. If that case can be made, then what we are really saying is that many people do not know enough to be citizens. If in turn that is true, then democracy is itself unjustifiable. The case for restricting political speech, no matter how radical or insurrectionary, is not like the case for restricting conduct that adversely affects others. A radical idea is not like an act of assault or robbery. Unless that distinction is accepted, democracy is not really accepted. Next, religious fundamentalists and the religious orthodox are a newly resurgent source of hostility towards free expression. They want what they claim is heresy, blasphemy, or impiety to be prevented or punished. Various religious personalities joined in the ignorant campaign to remove from circulation Martin Scorsese's brilliant and reverent and subtly, rather than crudely religious movie, The Last Temptation, while only half-heartedly reproaching the government of Iran for commissioning the murder of Salman Rushdie. These and other events bring home vividly the truth that free government could never have come into existence in the modern world if religious belief had remained unenlightened, and if fanaticism had not abated, or been made to abate itself. The American Constitution itself was the product of heterodoxy and rationalism. Another source of hostility to free expression is the campaign waged against pornography by religious groups and by some radical feminists. The most audacious attempt was made by Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon to prohibit all pornography in Minneapolis because they claimed that it led to violence against women. They, of course, had no evidence for their assertion, but they could count on their own usual enemies in society to side with them on this issue. They failed, but it's hard to think of a more blatant exercise in repression than this one. The last source that I would mention explicitly is the effort made on campuses and elsewhere, with or without the help of government, to police offensive speech. Everywhere you look, from Dartmouth to Stanford, you will find dangerously broad definitions of what constitutes punishable racist or sexist speech. And procedures apt for use in punishing remarks or epithets. You have only to go to page 8 of this morning's Times to find another example, this one at Michigan. The proposed new code at Stanford is only the most publicized example. In an op-ed piece, Sharon Gwynn, one of the student leaders at Stanford, said that though if free speech were limited, educational opportunities would be limited also. Nevertheless, promoting ideas of hatred only serves to hinder the advancement of society. Well, if she is right, then the capitalist supporters of Amherst should try to banish the works of Marx and Engels and Lenin and Althusser and Gramsci and Foucault from its libraries and classrooms. They teach, among other things, a doctrine of class hatred, a point that the Stanford student implicitly conceded, even though she hastens to police speech that she and almost all of us find offensive. There are, of course, many other motives for hostility to free expression than the ones I've mentioned, and there are many, too many, other incidents that we could study profitably as symptomatic, but I think the most important general point is that many groups in society simply do not want certain things expressed. They want the world purged of what outrages or disgusts them, what shocks or hurts their feelings. This is the main and undying passion behind repression of expression. The fear of subversion, the fear of the contagious effects of expression on seducible minds is much less important than the mere fact that someone has dared express certain thoughts in any of the modes of expression, thoughts that are radical or irreligious or obscene or pornographic or mendacious.
And my parents? Dad? Dad, here, stop it!
Wait, what's that? Let's look at your mom first. Yeah, look at one at a time. What happened? What happened? No. All right. No, it goes already. What happened to that one? It didn't go. It never went.
Yes, we will be the first. No, we have to stay standing until everybody else is there. Don't we?
Ben, hi Ben.
Wait, everybody's complimenting
Hey, Hammer. Yes, sir. Hey, Penny.
He made it.
Look at the ants. That is it. Hey, Tom. Tom, I want to meet my parents sometime today. Can I be around? I'll be around. All right.
Better be on there, right, dude. Let's go for those. I've never been in
If you own one, this is the day.
I call it done. Your NSADI.
everyone else. Glad to. Think so? Hey, this could be the time of discovery.
Hey, Ben.
No record of your drugs. That's gotta go.
Well, he's gonna come all around. No, they got down. So it's gonna happen. You could have done that this morning. So it isn't yet. You did that? Nobody. Bro, where's the sun? Oh, I hate this stuff.
Hi, Daryl.
You're gonna hire about 3 people to videotape.
No.
This was not very long. Oh my God, look at this. Okay, we count from here on out.
Should be. Oh boy.
You guys are there. I got a good picture.
By this time, half the parents are back.
Nice.
Hi, Ben. Ben, get us on. You can't get us on film. Are we on film, Ben? Are we on film? Did you get us, Ben? I was updated the prom. I walked in the
You're missing us here. How many pictures of other people? Let's go, Rob. Beth. Morning. Good morning. Yep. I was in his section during this. Oh, were you?
En ouder, dus kan het ook dit haar vast
I do one. I can.
I have an address for you. Find me at lunch.
Stretching our car.
voice too?
Is our voice here?
Eye
We'd
fluttering
like to
thing.
take this time to record how we feel about you.
Look at his eye fluttering.
Thank you. It's been a long weekend, but you look great. Huge. Classmates, there's no need to worry. Your parents and friends are happily seated. They've been fed, rested, entertained, and most importantly, they are dry. You can now sit back and relax and enjoy these few hours before you have to finish packing the car. Now, it seems like all commencement speakers, at one point or another, label their class. They stand up and explain why their class is so markedly different from the ones above and below that it obviously deserves a title. However, each year, these unique and distinct classes all end up with the same nickname, the class of transition. I'd like to break this tradition of summing up a class's collective experience in one word, but there is an eerie trend which has run through our time at Amherst and respective high schools. Our 8 years of secondary school and college were Ronald Reagan's 8 years in office. And while I've never been much of a Republican, the correlation does tempt me enough to wishfully say, 4 more years. But if we really are the class of Reagan, then doesn't that make you feel warm all over? I think it only appropriate today that we discuss cliches and slogans. Many aphorisms crop up at this time each year. Parents, professors, and friends lean hard upon standard mottos when the graduation season draws near. We seniors have even tortured a few phrases into meaning what we wish them to mean. Over the past months, taking time off has come to stand for any activity that doesn't require 3 letters of recommendation. And the real world is that place which will undoubtedly make mincemeat of whomever we dislike or envy. Of course, the commencement speaker is obliged to recite a few axioms, and so I'll run through them now to save time. Class, commencement means beginning. I learned as much from the people here as I did from the books, and you are America's future. But there are other expressions which we seem to utter reflexively at this time of year. We say them to one another as if we are supposed to. We say them because, well, that's what everyone has said in May since we were freshmen. For example, as our ambition and discipline waned this spring, we lingered in Valentine, stretching each meal to the full 2 hours. We watched eager underclassmen hustle off to the computer center, apparently getting a head start on their theses. And then we said to one another, thank God we got into Amherst when we did, because we certainly couldn't gain admission now. I think we all know that that's a lie. If it's true that we could not get into Amherst anymore, then it's only because, as a class, we're not as proficient at destructive violence and hand-to-hand combat as the classes below us. Another crutch expression of the graduating season is, here at Amherst, we work hard and play hard. I have no idea why that excited me so much as a bright-eyed pre-freshman, but as a listless senior, I can confidently say that, for the most part, we play harder than we work. I have vague memories of hard work from high school, and as I recall, it involved waking up before noon 5 days a week, and actually attending classes from 8 till 3. I may be wrong, but weekends didn't begin on Wednesday afternoons, and deadlines were actually enforced. But the slogan I most detest, and which I'd like to spend some time critically examining, is the one my father wields so frequently whenever he senses that I am sleeping my way through yet another semester. I have to imagine you've all heard it or said it in some form or another, but for me, it's always gone like this. Eric, you realize, of course, that these college years are the 4 best years of your life. Does this mean that as the years go by, I will be forced to live in a smaller and smaller room? That I will always eat off a tray, but it will be hotter and wetter as I grow older? And if my best years are over, how will that look to prospective employers? How can I get around this on my resume? Aside from being an utterly depressing thought, it is also an idea which inspires competition. When someone tells me about their college years and how they were the best of their life, I always feel challenged that somehow my experience had better equal, if not top, theirs. Oh yeah, I feel compelled to say? Well, my time at Amherst was so great, they were the 4 best years of my mother's life. We all love to exaggerate our pasts. When the Student Center opened last year, I excitedly told freshmen how cool the snack bar at Fairweather used to be, and how awesome it was when Flicks was in Merrill. I bragged about the superior basketball acoustics in the cage, and the homey feeling of picking up mail in Converse. Of course, those were all lies. In reality, the only advantage Fairweather had over our present snack bar was that you were free to purchase more than 1 beer per semester. There was absolutely nothing awesome about movies in Merrill, and as for the acoustics of the cage, the most resonant sound that year seemed to be Williams fans chanting, "Where's your gym?" But it's more than just nostalgia. The 4 best years idea seems tied into the notion that college is the time to have fun, because the real world is going to be so straight-faced and serious. We pull pranks in college because afterward, rules must be obeyed. We funnel beers down our throat because supposedly we'll be drinking milk for the rest of our lives. It's our time to cut loose, our chance to do everything we're not allowed or simply not supposed to do in proper society. Adults seem to envy the absence of structure in our days. They vicariously enjoy stories which involve activities they would not dare attempt now. It seems the outside world brings a strong presence of repression and depression, and that scares me. I am fearful of the pace life will take after today, and the demands it will place on me. I'm wary of my private life being invaded by the ever-expanding 50, 60, and 70-hour work week. But that's not what the real world threatens most strongly to strip from me. Beginning the day with burgers and garden will certainly end, and it probably should. But that's not the precious aspect of college, of which I feel most protective. It seems to me that what has been most invigorating about these years, and what the outside world is poised to destroy, is the curiosity which has only recently been awakened and tantalized in all of us. The desire to question, to listen, and understand has only lived inside me for 2 of these past 4 years, and it is a trait which I have seen in only a few real-world adults. When they speak of college as a haven of delight, I think it may have more to do with the freedom to pursue one's curiosity than it does the ability to sleep till noon. It seems that careers, families, and the accompanying responsibilities often nudge learning out of the daily schedule. The workaday life seems miserable to me more because of its tedium than its long hours. Similarly, it's not laziness I cherish most about Amherst, but the setting it has provided for exploring the minds of others as I expand my own. The exhilarating rush of finally understanding the concept, those moments of revelation which follow hours of work and years of ignorance, are surely my most prized at Amherst. And it has only been 4 years. I have only been actively engaged in my work for the past 2 years, but in either case, our sense of curiosity is still so embryonic and so fragile. It has developed and grown tremendously, but thinking, questioning, doubting, and wondering are all activities we've only recently learned to enjoy. It simply hasn't been enough. I don't feel done. I'm not prepared to put the blinders of real life on yet and march to the loudest rhythm. The exploration and struggle for understanding has been too magnificent and too absorbing to stash away after graduation like some fraternity hat. I don't mean to lecture because I don't have a nugget of wisdom to present to you. But I do believe that if we stop questioning and probing all that intrigues us about this world, then we will one day say that Amherst was the 4 best years of our lives. If we ignore our curiosity, if we allow it to wither and die, then these will certainly have been our best years. But if we nurture and sustain our desire to know, if we foster all that is so vibrant in our minds right now, these will have been our first 4 great years. Instead of serving as a brief dalliance, Amherst will be the foundation upon which we build for the rest of our lives. For if we keep exploring, we will keep growing. Before concluding, I'd like to tell a brief story. Nearly 40 years ago, my cousin Bobby attended the University of Pennsylvania. At that time, the captain of the debating team was traditionally invited to address the class at commencement. Bobby was captain of the team his senior year, but was not extended an invitation to speak. At the time, his last name was Zaklinski, and though he never received an explanation, he's always assumed that Zaklinski sounded too immigrant or too Jewish. The 2 previous speakers had been Jews, but their names, Spector and Gordon, were ambiguous enough to pass. Zaklinski, however, could not be tolerated. And so it is with great pride that I stand here today. Class of 1989, I am proud to be among you. For you have brought great things to this campus. You have brought Spectrum, Amherst's Third World Theater Collective. You have brought Madness This, a magazine of women's writing and creative work. Some of you have helped resurrect the Sabrina. Some have been vital to the reemergence of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance. Some have helped found Outreach, a social service organization which links the college to the community. And others have unselfishly dedicated time and energy to smooth the bumpy transition from fraternities to deans. You've made your voices heard this year at events such as National Black Student Action Day, the Pro-Choice March on Washington, and the debate to boycott Coke. I'm also proud to be a part of this class, because today Amherst graduates its first 4 women and gender studies majors. Too often during the year, we belittle our achievements and deny ourselves a full enjoyment of our rewards, lest we be perceived as driven or over-aggressive. But today, we should not be afraid to be proud. Today, we should discard concerns for coolness and savor the satisfying feeling of accomplishment. We've complained and cut on ourselves long enough. Now, it's time to take heart in what we are. For each one of us is entitled to hold our head up as we stride confidently across this podium to receive the diploma. Classmates, we arrived here strangers, and though, as we grew to know one another, we have at times misunderstood, envied, idolized, ignored, loved, and despised. Today, I hope that we can throw our arms around one another and admit that we will sorely miss it all. I embrace you and wish you nothing but happiness. Good luck.
Members of the faculty, members of the class of '89, parents and friends of Amherst. I once heard Stephen Jay Gould, the distinguished evolutionary biologist, give the keynote speech at the Williams College commencement. I'm sorry, but that's where it was. He said that there was one traditional theme for all commencement addresses, and he formulated it as follows. Each of us is individually infinitely precious, but we should all be conscious of belonging to a community. This piety certainly had a familiar ring to it, and I was pleased when he said he would use his time to explore whether it made good sense biologically or not. As I recall, he emerged at the end of a fascinating extempore lecture pronouncing the sentiment biologically correct. We are, indeed, it turns out, one by one, precious little organisms, but we should all be mindful of our duty to the survival of our species. Many in the audience seemed relieved at his conclusion, but I remember thinking at the time that at certain points, for all his marvelous facility with language and examples, he was pushing his evidence too hard. However, the sentiment is certainly firmly embedded as a piece of cultural orthodoxy, at least in the Western psyche, and it tends to come out on occasions when a high-sounding, middle-of-the-road position seems politically desirable, in which I would include not merely commencement addresses, but the final exams leading up to them. The American intellectual historian Richard Hofstadter was fond of quoting a humorous inversion of the sentiment which he drew from a student's exam paper. For modern man to escape from his overriding sense of estrangement and alienation, the young man had written portentously, it is necessary for the individual to step forth from the crowd en masse. Actually, I believe this formulation is essentially accurate. It indicates precisely what is needed, and at the same time, the extreme difficulty of achieving it. My theme for today does not at first sight sound as though it stood foursquare in this tradition, but I think you will find that it is related to it. I wouldn't want to cheat you of your expectations. But I am, in fact, going to talk briefly about words, books, and in praise of writers. And my thinking about it is this. You are at a juncture in your lives when it does not hurt to take stock of what you have done and see what it amounts to. And I am at a juncture in mine when I need to hear myself say certain things out loud yet again. For more than 16 years, receding back to some distant point before your conscious memories begin, you have been bombarded with verbal encouragement to improve your characters and enlarge your minds, and you are finally being released to get on with it. These are, in fact, the very last words that will be laid upon you before I thrust into your hands the piece of sheepskin which certifies you all as ready to begin life. So listen up one more time. Ponder the enormity, the grotesqueness, if you will, of society's assumptions about you and your needs, and let us paint them in the darkest possible tones of parody. You were apparently still too young for experience, too raw and unformed. It was better to insulate you from read about it secondhand, to draw the juice and the color from it and put it down in black and white, where banality softens and the letter kills. What a wholesale conspiracy to keep you under wraps. You were in high school, and things seemed dangerously likely to bust out all over. Here was this boy, this girl, sitting there being sassy at the dinner table, with almost visibly rampant hormones, their rooms, their clothes, their music, their lives, revolting in almost every detail. What to do about them? American society had the answer. Ship them out into the country, into one of those bizarre institutions called colleges, a curious cross between a sanitarium and a monastery. Give them plenty of scope for exercise, and tell them to curl up with a good book until it all passes over. No wonder these institutions, these repositories of adolescent Sturm und Drang, which seem in season to affect all inmates alike, are viewed with such ambivalence by so much of America. The jaundiced eye of parody has so much to work with. Where else are there such manicured acres of verbiage, such wastes of misapplied rhetoric, such fence-sitting, hair-splitting, finger-pointing moralism, such self-indulgent, self-deluding psychobabble, and so on? If this is what the liberal arts ideal comes to, who needs it? Let us instead commend those who seem to manage to resist it. Silence the voices, and while we are at it, let us spin out the library and lighten the weight of books on our lives. Never read print, said Dr. W.G. Grace, England's greatest cricketer, in a terse and breezy formulation, bad for the eye. It implies there are other things to read than print and books, and of course there are, the seam of the ball, for one thing. So much for the parody, which many people who should know better come dangerously close to taking literally. Let us put the case a little more quietly. It is not only illiterates who complain about books and words. Poets themselves feel oppressed by the burden of other people's words on their lives, the accumulated weight of tomes crushing their own spirit, vision, and spirit of invention. Mega biblion, mega kakon, said the Hellenistic poet Callimachus. See, it doesn't have to be Thucydides every time. It means a big book is a big evil. His distaste was not merely for lugging heavy furniture around, but for the crushing effect on our lives and sensibility of the weight of too many words. Let Robert Graves say it once more. Children are dumb to say how hot the day is, how hot the scent is of the summer rose, how dreadful the black wastes of evening sky, how dreadful the tall soldiers drumming by. But we have speech to chill the angry day, and speech to dull the rose's cruel scent. We spell away the overhanging night, we spell away the soldiers and the fright. There's a cool web of language winds us in, retreats from too much joy or too much fear. We grow sea green at last and coldly die in brininess and volubility. I am fond of using this quote, as you may have noticed, and fond too of pointing out how the simple monosyllables and repetitions of the child are dumb to say how hot the day is, how hot the scent, and so on, give way to the elaborate polysyllabic conceit of brininess and volubility, adult language distancing itself fancifully from vivid first impressions. This is a fine poetic expression of the way language can muffle experience, and I believe its strength lies in its truth. There are many other more prosaic accounts which make the same point, and for a while it has been quite trendy in critical circles to talk of the way in which we are prisoners of the language we use as a prime feature of the general culture in which we are enmeshed. I would not argue with this perception because it sets the base of difficulty on which we have to work, but it is not where I want to come out. I would say in passing that I believe as individuals and as a species we are singularly inept at communication, that many of our global problems and most of our individual frustrations proceed from the suffocating way in which we find our truest fears and desires somehow inexpressible, and that as a nation we seem to be getting worse at using words overall. If you take the simple example of battlefield letters home from soldiers in the Civil War and those from more recent conflicts, from common soldiers and from officers alike, there is seen, I think, a sad deterioration in the strength and vividness of the writing. The enemy fire was heavy and withering, and you might say our men advanced across a mat of Christian boys. There is a simple strength and rhythm and poignancy in this Civil War line. I would say that overall Civil War soldiers wrote better than our contemporaries, and I find it hard to avoid concluding that they may have thought better as well. By now I may seem to have boxed myself into an unfortunate corner of contradiction, a large reductio ad absurdum, that 16 unrelenting years of education can only have negative results in total, because each year buries us deeper under the mounds of words and print and renders us less capable of making sense of our world in anything but phrases that are worn and trite. At the end, there can be no first impressions left. As the lovely Dorothea Brooke says sadly in Middlemarch, it is very difficult to be learned. It seems as if people were worn out on the way to great thoughts and can never enjoy them because they are too tired. How comes it to pass, wrote Edward Young, that born originals we must die as copies? This is how it comes to pass. And when it happens, it is the ultimate and saddest travesty and betrayal of all, because when it happens, education has been redefined as stultification. However, what I have sketched in this harsh parody is not, I think, an inescapable reductio ad absurdum, but just one side of a paradox whose other side offers us escape. It is true that the letter can kill and often does, but it is also true that we look to the word, the logos, to give us life and to shape our lives. This paradox involved, and for all the gravitational pull toward banality and convention, is to bring us out on the far side, capable of thinking our own thoughts in our own words, simple and direct, and of making our own choices, and to broaden the base on which we both think and choose. But consider how hard this is to do, first of all, in our simple personal exchanges. How few there seem to be who are strong enough to be disarmed and trusting and to say exactly what they mean. We play games with each other, trading conventional formulations, and are puzzled and hurt when others don't seem able to read between our lines. Perhaps the deepest craving we all have is to find someone with whom we can finally drop the guard, be completely ourselves, and say everything. And it probably becomes harder to do because a big piece of us has come to be duped by all the misleading flack we have thrown up between us in the interval. Turn to the world of public discourse and public text. Think of the power of the word to change the world, and then how constraining that word can turn out to be. I am not here talking of any occasional flash or turn of phrase, but of the great scriptures that have moved and shaped civilization. One could take Homer's Iliad or the Quran or the Torah, but I will take instead the book that worked hardest on me, the New Testament. Think of the vast movements of conversion that flowed from it, reordering a continent out of a dark age. The whole new systems of living, such as monasticism, or systems of values, such as chivalry. Think of the whole new set of structures and of relationships in the public realm, such as those between church and state. And think of the huge influences on personal spirituality and mysticism across the centuries, spelling out endless authoritative readings of guidance or consolation or terror for countless searching souls. But then think of the Inquisition, or think of Northern Ireland, where the same book that was meant to declare the truth that sets men free is invoked by both sides as a kind of authoritative license to kill. It is as though the same paradox and tension that I saw in each of us between a capacity for enlightenment and a tendency to constrain the truth existed in the texts themselves. But of course it does not. It is still in us, and we project it onto them by our readings of them. Finally then, let us turn to the writers of words. It must be clear by now that it takes some nerve, and more than nerve, to be a writer, to be prepared for the labor of clearing away the dead letters, to make room for us to say something new. So here I am, wrote Eliot, trying to learn to use words, and every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure, because one has only learned to get the better of things for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way in which one is no longer disposed to say it. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate. The passage is perhaps a little self-consciously overdramatic, but we should not underestimate the cost of swimming against the currents of words around us to advance to a personal truth. It gets harder when the personal truth we wish to narrate strikes against some important social orthodoxy. There are writers here today in this audience and on this platform who have been actively persecuted for what they had to write. But they had to write it nonetheless if something vital within them was not to die. This is portentous, heavy-sounding stuff, though some writers have found ways to make it humorous. Archie, the cockroach, which the poet Don Marquis discovered typing in his room, begins his first poem with the line, "Expression is the need of my soul." And the poet says he could not work the capital letters, and he had a great deal of difficulty operating the mechanism that shifts the paper so that a fresh line may be started. We never saw a cockroach work so hard or perspire so freely in all our lives before. Actually, he hits the key with his head, and as his corpus starts enlarging, he asks for a football helmet to protect it. There is indeed a kind of temperament which has to write, for which expression is a need of the soul. There are fine writers in this class. I will not name any because I cannot name them all. And I want to use this last moment to urge them to be true to their skill and to their innermost needs. Keep faith with your writing, because an important piece of your integrity depends on it. Society at large, and sometimes to their shame, even teachers, are discouraging to young writers. Don't bother to start if you don't have anything to say, is the attitude. The whole point is that you often do not know exactly what you have to say until you try to confront yourself with it on paper. If you don't try, you'll never know. I don't actually direct this message to any small fragment or coterie of the class. To a certain degree, we are all called on to be writers. And don't think for a moment that however lonely the act of composition, there is anything necessarily self-absorbed about the writer's work. We speak words to be heard, and we write them to be read. The impulse is in large measure social, not only social, but in fact crucial to society. This is the point of the whole thing. This is the point where one returns to the sentiment of John Jay Gould and Richard Hofstadter's student, and it is in large measure the point of 16 years of education. It is essential for a civilization, a society, and especially perhaps a democratic society, that the whole lumpen, indigestible mass of its norms and practices and institutions, rhetoric and myths, be constantly rejuvenated, discomfited, questioned, kicked into life by the challenge of those who strive in their thinking and in the expression of their thought to advance beyond the conventions they have inherited. The First Amendment is not a magnanimous piece of altruism permitted by democracy to demonstrate its generosity of spirit. It is an essential device by which a society offers itself a window open to the new, the living, and the invigorating, instead of closing itself down into stagnancy and death. John Stuart Mill is absolutely 110% correct. When the mind is no longer compelled, he writes, in the same degree as at first, to exercise its vital powers on the questions which its belief presents to it, there is a progressive tendency to forget all of the belief except the formularies, or to give it a dull and torpid assent, as if accepting it on trust dispensed with the necessity of realizing it in consciousness, or testing it by personal experience, until it almost ceases to connect itself at all with the inner life of the human being. Then are seen the cases so frequent in this age of the world as almost to form the majority, in which the creed remains, as it were, outside the mind, encrusting and petrifying it against all other influences, addressed to the higher parts of our nature, manifesting its power by not suffering any fresh and living conviction to get in, but itself doing nothing for the mind or heart except standing sentinel over them to keep them vacant. So then I conclude, but we have speech to chill the angry day. Well, not necessarily to chill it. We can use it if we know how to soothe the angry day, or to warm it, or to make it vital with new ideas and possibilities. Speech is often the only tool or medicine we have. Some of its finest possibilities you've unquestionably learned here. But above all, I would hope that in this small college you were encouraged, among all the words dinning in your ears, to listen for your own true voice, speaking your own mind ever more surely. I hope you were also encouraged to believe that there were others eager to hear your voice and engage with it, to allow exciting new ideas to emerge and be given shape between you. That is what it is to be well taught. And I believe that that is what has happened here with you in these last 4 years. So be proud of what you've done here. You came and you listened and you spoke. Go out now and tell the world something new, something that means a lot to you, and something that it needs to hear. Thank you.
Timothy David Bellevet. Douglas Henderson Brown. Michael Anthony Brown. Regis Ryan Brown. David Christopher. Danielle Vaughn Carver. Anne Claire Sarah Helen Diamond.
Woo! Yeah!
Timothy John Dickey. Suzanne Karen Dickman. Abby Marks Gardner. Elizabeth Ann Garner. Leroy Bradford Garner III. Savita Nicole Krishna. Paul Matthew Lassay. Sarah Elizabeth Lang. Catherine Marie Langevin. Raymond Victor Lavoie, Jr. Robert Allen Lawsky. Christopher James. Uni Lee. Michael Sungman Lee. Eleanor Lau Leggett. Peter James Rooney.
After that, Earl.
Michelle Fern Rosenstein. Monica Barbara Siebert. Brian Charles Silbernagel. Rebecca Lee Skillman. Bonnie Laurellen Friedman. Monica Lee Stroke. John Thomas Sweeney III. Jean Therese Walkenhut. Jonathan David Wald. Robert Carl Alexander Zachar. Eric Bruce Zicklin. Benjamin Scott Zimmerman.